this evening. I know it's been a long day, but hopefully this will be really useful for you. And so this is just a quick overview of what this evening is going to look like. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what instigated this blueprint boom, if you will, at our company. And then I'm going to give you an overview of service design blueprints, how to get buy-in. We're going to look at how to prepare and set up something like this. We're going to look at how to do some, we call them bubble up sessions. We'll get a little into that later. And then we'll do some Q&A as well. All right, so moving on. So I'm going to start with a story about real-time service design that starts with COVID. And it's just to give you a little more context, and I think it's something that's going to resonate with many of you. And so as an enterprise software company that supports all of travel, it was probably February of 2020 when we felt the impact of COVID. So if in 2019, we were the unsinkable ship, in 2020, COVID was the iceberg. And there was really nothing we could do to stop it. And so while our company did everything they could to keep from losing people, we, like many other travel suppliers, were hemorrhaging cash. And so by May, about 2/3 of us were furloughed for months. And when we returned, we were fully remote for the first time, and half of our department was gone. But in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. And that's precisely what this was. This was an opportunity to do something really great. And now we had this new vision, this vision to adapt and focus on the right things to produce long-term sustainable success so that when travel recovers, we'll be positioned to deliver something truly innovative. And so for our work in design strategy, pre-COVID, most of what we did consisted of in-person workshops for reimagining products. Now that we've come back from COVID, it's fully remote, and nearly all of the support requests that we get are for reimagining processes. So enter service design blueprinting. And this is just an example of what one might look like in Mural. And for those of you who aren't familiar, a service design blueprint is an activity that helps teams to collaboratively align on this accurate view of a current state process. It's going to reveal blind spots and insights so that teams can actually solve these complex challenges together. And you want to do this pretty much any time that your team wants to improve, design, or understand a process or a service. And it works very well when you're looking at multiple teams coordinating across multiple channels. And so when it comes to doing this remotely specifically, these are some tools that you can use. Mural, Microsoft Teams, that at least we've tried that have proven to be very effective, and assets from Figma also integrate very nicely. And so maybe you're thinking, well, okay, this seems great, but how do I get this stressed out product manager to adopt something like this? And sorry if the font's a little off, I had to change it last minute, but I've put 3 techniques here that you can take back with you to really help to get that buy-in. We're going to connect on outcomes, look at the word of mouth, and success stories. And I'll go a little deeper into each of these on the next few slides. So connecting on outcomes, that's the first thing you want to do. So whether you're thinking of a product manager, a VP, or a director, there are 3 things that they all want to accomplish. They all want client satisfaction, revenue maximization, and operational efficiency. And so when you talk about service design outcomes, you want to just really stick to the benefits that directly connect to those goals. These are your talking points when a product manager expresses problems related to any kind of process or service. There are 3 things that you can focus in on. Okay, so word of mouth. So as Brian likes to say, turn your biggest critic into your biggest fan. So I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by that. We had a project where we had a participant that was so skeptical and so jaded that his relationship to this project was like a prisoner in a POW camp. And what I mean by that is that he was so beaten down by prior process improvement efforts that he couldn't even recognize the escape opening when it appeared. But thankfully, we were able to persuade him to fully engage anyway. And as a result of his participation, there were 2 huge chronic pain points for him that were resolved. And one of the bigger ones was that he was able to get another person hired onto his team so that he was no longer carrying the full workload of his department. And so his view completely transformed from that. And now it's funny enough, he's actually bringing other employees to come look at that blueprint that they did together, which brings me to the next point on here, which is give them artifacts to share. So empower them to make that case on your behalf. Give them a good report, a good success story, a pre-read, give them that access to the mural board. And so success stories. So I kind of chopped this down in the interest of time because I want to give us more time later to hopefully get into actually doing some fun service design activities in Miro. So just looking at one, this is a recent example of how we've used service design blueprinting at our company. And so we're going to look at the process, some artifacts, results, and I'm going to share some top facilitator insights there. On, something like that. There we go. Okay, so it's a PSS implementation. So this is the way that we deliver our products to over 380 customers across the globe. And the objective of these workshops was to shrink the amount of time it takes to do an implementation so that we can get to revenue faster. And prior, it took about 18 months to do something like that. And so we focused in on 4 stages of the critical path. And something that we discovered, and this is the case, to be honest, with all of the processes we've looked at, there was really very little to no usable documentation, right? But as we went through this, we were actually able to capture 300 touch points and 90 opportunities across 4 separate blueprints. And the whole thing took about 39 hours. And you may see that and think, my God, 39 hours, no one's going to agree to something like that. But what you have to consider is that they have been trying to resolve this problem for years. And this is certainly more on the extreme of larger projects. Okay, so this slide is a breakdown of some key findings across stages. And so when you're doing a report, this would be your money slide. So you want to have your top pain points, top opportunities, and give a breakdown of potential savings if duration reduction is one of your primary objectives. So altogether, there was an estimated savings of up to about 130 days. Now, what's not seen here is that if we can successfully implement all of their ideas, we can save about maybe 5 months or nearly a third off of that implementations. So this is, we're going to call it Key Area 3 blueprint. And what's to know here is that all these 4 stages are part of that one Key Area 3. And don't worry about the sticky notes, like you're not really supposed to see them. The point is really just that this is an example of how you might document some of those results in a report for duration reduction at an executive level. So you'll have current time to implement, which for just this key area was between 150 and 300 days. We've got savings up to 40 days off of that, which is very big for them. And then you want to list additional key results for steps, pain points, things like that. And so when you're thinking of those opportunities, the way that we capture those is by looking at the pain points through 4 lenses. And the reason why we do that is because it helps to trigger this greater breadth and depth of ideas by approaching needs through multiple perspectives. So in other words, you're going to get this much more holistic approach for solutioning. Okay, and so this is the ideation board that we have for key area 3. And the important thing to focus on here is the layout and the approach. So you won't be able to see it, but I'll tell you that each row represents a lens. So for example, the top row is all customer lens, teams, process, technology, and so forth. The blue boxes at the bottom are a way for you to capture the total estimated savings. And as a tip, if you're going to apply this in a situation where you're doing that duration reduction, for ideation, it's better to do t-shirt sizing at first. So small, medium, large, you know, ask them what that means. And then you can kind of do some follow-ups afterwards to identify more specific quantifying for that. Okay, so the next important point here is that you want to make your ideas actionable. So they took those ideas and then they prioritized them across a timeline. And this became their implementation roadmap. And I highly recommend that you do this for any blueprinting you do, because they come up with a lot of ideas. They are prioritized on a high level, but it can be overwhelming if you don't have this way of saying, well, what do I do first? And so we have activities to help organize that as part of this process. And so another cool thing you can do is to include a slide like this in the appendix. And essentially what you're doing is you're highlighting quote unquote golden opportunities to explore for additional savings. So if they have like just the very initial thing of an idea, or if they have some kind of question that opens that up, these are some other areas that they can start looking into. Okay, so here's 3 takeaways that we got from that I want to be able to share with you, because you can take those and apply them yourself. So to expedite participant proficiency in Mural, something you can do to make sessions run a lot faster and smoother is get people using or comfortable using Mural pretty quickly. And you can kind of get a 2-for-1 here with creating psychological safety and getting them ramped up in Mural by hosting a kickoff that includes 30 minutes in a Mural activity. So something like hopes and fears, which you can look up, or you can ask more about that later. That's a great activity that kind of addresses both of those bullet points there. Managing expectations. So the best way to avoid upsets is to get teams aligned on what to expect. And so, for example, one way to mitigate resistance is to give them a timeline, let them know what they'll be doing and what they need to do at various points in the process. That way they're not, you know, caught off guard and didn't account for it, that sort of thing. Ideate together. So your participants are very smart, but don't assume that this is going to come, you know, very quickly and easily to them. Break it down for them. Do examples together. You can have an ideation spreadsheet template if you want. It's good to give it as an option. I'd say most participants prefer to ideate in Mural together. All right, so while it may be optional for the initial ideation, it is amazing for helping with reporting and follow-up validation. So creating this template for capturing ideas in relation to those pain points, oh my gosh, it's just changed everything for the reporting world. But something you can do, here's a hot tip if you're using Mural, is you can hold down the shift key and drag over the sticky notes that you want, and then just kind of right click, copy and text, or copy as text, and then paste it into your spreadsheet or a Word document. It automatically converts it all into there. And it goes the other way too. So if you have a spreadsheet full of stuff, you can just copy and then paste it into the board as sticky notes. And then I've just kind of color coordinated here so you can see, you know, kind of where things might go, you know, ideas. All right, so these are some takeaways from another case study I didn't cover in the interest of time, but I thought that it might still be valuable for you. And so I still want to share that. So gathering context. These things are granular, and it can be really difficult to track with people. So something that we've done that is really helpful before getting very far into the blueprint is getting a walkthrough of the software used for that process that you're focusing on, if that's something relevant. So it really helps you to visualize and understand what it is they're talking about as you're documenting. Never skip steps, okay? So, and we'll get into what some of those steps are a little bit, but the main thing here is that you don't wanna over trim the process to save time. Because what happens is you think you're saving time up front, but it actually doubles effort later. Next is give team ownership. So assign maybe 1 or 2 SMEs to help capture things, to be your scribes. Discussion is gonna happen, but encourage them to distill those things onto a sticky note. And then also when you transition from working with one SME to meet with a larger group, have that SME, and in case you guys don't know, a SME is a subject matter expert, but have them give a playback or a walkthrough of the work you did together on the board. All right, so how do you go about setting something like this up? Like, how much time do you need? Who should be there? What do I need to get started? These are all questions some of you might be wondering about. And so, how long does it take? I'd say on average, it takes about 6 hours to prepare. And depending upon, schedules, calendar, things like that, you might spread that out over a couple of weeks. The activity itself where everyone's meeting and doing things is going to take about 16 hours. And you can spread that out over a couple of weeks as well. And then for reporting, it takes about a week. I highly recommend you have 2 facilitators. It just works so much better when you have that set up. And then in terms of how many people should be there, I think the sweet spot is really between 2 and 8. You just want to make sure that you have the right people there, that you have the people who have a really rich understanding of the process and have the right perspective. And I will say that with all of this, scope matters. So it depends on stakeholder availability, the amount of data you're working with, things like that. All right, so what can stakeholders expect to get from participation? Because that, what am I getting from this time investment? So they're going to get a report, and inside of that report, they're going to get a service design canvas. They're going to get this documented visual of a current state process. They're going to get that list of gaps, points, opportunities, actionable insights, and the prioritized ideas mapped to an initial roadmap. Some additional benefits are that you're going to get clarity on vision and goals, and the whole team is going to be aligned on that. Okay, so next, the initial intake. So this is kind of like the first thing you do before you get into any of this is you meet with that project lead for an initial overview of the project needs. It's just your intake session. And we've used a version of a service design canvas to really assist in that. It captures all the information that you're going to need so that you can get together later and review that together. So these are 3 activities that are going to help you to get the most out of your service design blueprint. And it's not within the scope of this session to go into these, but if you have any questions about them, we can try to address those later in the Q&A. Okay, so for a planning meeting, so once they've done that service design canvas, they've filled it out, they've sent it back to you, you're going to review it, you're going to look at any research insights. You want to look at what research or pre-work is still needed in order to do this successfully. You'll look at the scope, the complexity to kind of pinpoint dates. And then something very, very helpful that we've developed is, well, we're calling it a data collector, but basically your SME is going to fill out kind of like a step-by-step, what is this process? And we'll look a little closely on that on the next slide. But as a tip, something to keep in mind, and I'm sure you all know this, and may be experiencing this right now, that everything in remote collaboration takes longer, and your participants, and they're going to get distracted. There's the siren call of the email inbox, and you have to contend with. So something you want to do is to have more frequent but shorter sessions, include some breaks, energizers, things like that. And so here's an example of a data collector. So you have them populate all of the tasks and activities, then you have the owner, who's doing that task. And then how, if it's applicable, how long does it take? And then you'll have them list out any dependencies, and then who does that output go to? So when you're considering teams, and I mentioned this a little before, you want the right people at the right time. So work with that project lead to identify session participants who need to be there. And something you may want to do is validate with another team member who's going to be participating that that's correct. And the reason why is because, people switch to new roles, things like that, and they may not always know if this truly is the right person to be standing in for this viewpoint. Also, global considerations. Think about time zone and how that might affect someone's participation. If you're going to have something at the end of the day for someone, make accommodations to kind of work better for them. And then complete participation. This is a really big thing. So you need to get commitment from the project lead and from the participants that they are going to be there for every session and they're going to be fully engaged participating, because if they're not, it shows up in the results and it's not a good use of anyone's time. Oh, and then we'll tip off to the side. When you're working with their time zones, this worldtimebuddy.com is fabulous for just really easily and quickly isolating an optimal time for multiple time zones. Setting up the virtual, and again, fonts, bothers me just looking at it. Once you've received that data collector, it does not apply to you for UX operations templates, but you can sample it. It's something I highly recommend you do. If you have Mural or something like that, is set up a template so that you can easily, quickly replicate the elements that you need to execute a service design blueprint. Good. All right. So elements of a service blueprint. Okay. So on the top row, we've got our customer actions. So all these sticky notes you see, these are all the steps and tasks that the customer is taking. Below that is a line of interaction. Okay, so this means that there is a level of transparency. The customer can see through that directly to these front stage actions, which are the things that your company is doing that they can see and interact with directly. The line of visibility here, this thick, bold line, it means that there's no transparency there. So that's going to be your backstage actions. It's all the things that your company's doing that the customer has zero interaction with. They have no idea what's going on there. And then line of interaction, again, followed by support processes. So that's going to be anything that doesn't fit into the above. And then it might be external partners as well, or automation. That's another really good place to put those sorts of steps. So it's a tip on how you set up that initial state, because ultimately what you're looking to do before you get into a larger group session is work with that SME, with that data collector to validate the current state of the process, because we tried having them start from nothing like we did in person. It did not work. It was torture. Don't do it to yourself. Don't do it to them. Have a good current state that they can react to. And so all you do is you select and copy just from the tasks and activities column, and then you just copy, paste it into the mural board. And then you color code those to match the legend, because typically you want to color code these sticky notes by role, who is performing the task. And you can customize what those colors are. And then you'll place them in order, in sequence, from left to right, top to bottom. Okay, and so this is that pre-workshop validation session I was telling you about. So validation is going to be based on the current state accuracy and completeness. And so you'll refine the scope and discuss potential session breakdown here. This is all done with that SME. And then you'll also want to make sure, double check, do we have the right people there? All right, bubble up sessions. All right, and I'm trying to go through this pretty quickly so we can get to the activity part because that's where the fun is. But this is about identifying gaps and pain points. So many process issues might be known, but they're often not documented. They might be understood by some, but the impact might not be apparent to decision makers. And so we call these bubble up sessions. I think it was Brian who coined that term because this part of the blueprinting process is where those key insights and pain points bubble up to the surface, bringing them to the attention of all participants, including decision makers. And so the focus of bubble up sessions is to get those pain points, those areas of opportunity so that you can uncover real needs for impactful solutions. And the way that you capture them is through notations. And
hey, Lauren.
It's really not that bad, I promise. Yeah.
Hey, Lauren, could you repeat that? For a second, you just paused. And maybe it's on my end, but could I just have you repeat it again, just in case?
Part that with the sessions are?
Yes.
Okay. So the focus of the bubble up sessions, again, is to capture pain points and areas of opportunity because you're wanting to uncover real needs for impactful solutions. And the way that you capture them is through notation bubbles. And really the only ones that a participant needs to concern themselves with is the pain point bubble and the question bubble. The others are things that the facilitator can take care of. Oh, and I guess as another note too, you don't have to use, sorry about that, you don't have to use these colors. You just want to reserve the proper color for whichever one of these points you decide. All right, so then on this slide here, so these sessions take 2 sets of 2 hours each, and you want to prepare participants for that time commitment in a kickoff session that breaks down the schedule of activities. And when you send out that invite, something really handy you can do is to just kind of copy paste that slide in there so that everyone can see and be reminded this is the breakdown of what we're going to be doing. Okay, and then there's again some explanations of what the bubbles are. All right, and so here's oh gosh, I hate that you can see this clearly, but so here's a snapshot of what it might look like from a previous workshop. And so what you'll notice is that the tasks with there's some tasks with just a couple of note bubbles, but in the after, there's now pain points near and attached to various tasks. And there's also this trail of pain points sweeping out and around from this section here. And so when pain points are closely related to each other, they'll be grouped like you see here, and they're not touching the tasks because they're pertaining to that section of 3. They're done by the same person in the same week. And so when you think about what you might do to facilitate sessions like this, what you need to accomplish for the 2 sessions really is covered in these 5 steps. So you want to just start with a purpose and an agenda so you can kind of set what they're focusing on. It's a great idea to start with a warm-up on day 1 to help get participants just more comfortable and kind of refresh them on their mural skills. It's also very helpful to have the SME walk participants through the current state, because not only are they just much better equipped to speak to it, but it also helps to give more ownership in the process. So that's that facilitator tip I'd given earlier. And so as they're reviewing, participants can ask questions, they can make adjustments, and they can be adding those inputs. And then on the last bubble up day, you'll do some affinity mapping to uncover additional insights, themes, and top areas of opportunity to focus on.